Oh, I see you couldn't stay away. I do so admire the morbid curiosity of you mortals. It makes me think there's still hope for you guys. Tonight's little tragedy is about a girl caught between two courts that want her dead. She has no idea the delightful horror she's about to get put through. Don't forget to subscribe to this humble channel of mine, darlings. It is the only way to ensure you keep getting invited back for more entertaining episodes. Now, let us begin. Two courts wanted me dead. Their prince wanted something worse. The archives of St. Giles were older than the city of Nocturne itself. They smelled of time. Not the pleasant, dusty scent of a well-kept library, but the deep, mineral tang of centuries pressing down on stone, of paper turning to dust, of ink that remembered secrets better than men. For Evangeline Rostova, this was the only church she had ever needed. Here, the dead spoke clearly, their words etched in vellum, their truths unburdened by the fleeting politics of the living. The codex she was translating was a blasphemy, a thing of rumor and nightmare. The lament of the first childer. It spoke of the progenitor's fall not as a righteous slaying of a god-tyrant, but as a betrayal. A murder. The text was archaic, the dialect a fossil, but the sentiment bled through the ages with shocking clarity, grief, rage, and a terrible, waiting patience. She leaned closer, her quill tracing a line about the silent bloom. A failsafe. A poison grown in a mortal garden to wither the branches of the immortal.
A blood price for godhood.
A floorboard creaked behind her. Not the gentle sigh of old wood settling, but the sharp, deliberate complaint of weight. Evangeline froze, her quill hovering over the page. She was not supposed to be here. The archivist had granted her access for one night, a favor bought with a bottle of brandy old enough to have a title, but he had locked the great doors behind her. No one else was in the archives, no one living. The air grew heavy, thick with a scent like an antiseptic flower shop, lilies and something sterile. Two figures detached themselves from the deeper shadows near the far stacks. They moved with a fluid grace that was deeply unnatural, their forms clad in tight-fitting crimson silks that seemed to drink the meager light. House Arcady. Her blood went cold.
The little scholar, lost in her books.
Evangeline slowly capped her ink pot, her movements deliberate. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drum in the cathedral silence, and she hated the sound. Hated that they could probably hear it. Her silver locket, cool against her skin, felt as heavy as an anchor.
The archives are closed.
Not to us. Matriarch Ravenna sends her regards. She has some questions for you about your reading material.
His eyes, a piercing, clinical violet, slid to the forbidden codex. Shit, this was not a random encounter. They knew what she was studying. The first agent took a step forward, his smile a perfect, unnerving thing.
This will be much simpler if you don't fight. Just look at me. Forget your little project. You want to come with us. You want to meet our matriarch.
He spoke, and the words tried to hook into her mind. She felt them, a greasy, invasive pressure against the walls of her thoughts, a command slithering like a snake toward the core of her will. It was the compulsion she'd read about, the mind-bending power of the vampire. And then it simply stopped. The pressure vanished, hitting some invisible, unbreakable wall within her. The agent's perfect smile faltered, confusion clouding his violet eyes.
What? Look at me, I said.
I am looking at you, and I'm not impressed.
The second agent hissed, his pleasant facade dropping to reveal the predator beneath. He lunged, not with grace now, but with the brutal speed of a striking viper. Evangeline flinched back, a scream catching in her throat as he reached for her. And then the shadows in the room moved. Not flickered, moved. A darkness deeper than the ambient gloom detached itself from the base of a bookshelf. There was no sound, only a blur of absolute black and the wet, percussive thump of a body hitting the floor. The second agent stood frozen for a beat, a perfect line of crimson appearing across the front of his silk tunic. He looked down, his expression one of pure disbelief before he crumpled into a heap. The first agent stared, his mouth agape, as blood-shocking, electric crimson against the pale marble began to pool around his fallen comrade. From the darkness, a figure resolved into shape, coalescing from the very shadows he had just used as a weapon. He was carved from night and winter. Tall and lean, with the coiled grace of a panther, he wore the severe, perfect tailoring of a high-born executioner. His face was a masterpiece of cold, aristocratic beauty, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, a mouth set in a line of sardonic indifference. But it was his eyes that held her. They were the color of molten silver, and they seemed to absorb all the light in the room, leaving nothing but a chilling, ancient intelligence. He wore the signet ring of House Morrow's, a silver serpent eating its own tail.
House Arcady always so theatrical, and their tailors are getting sloppy.
His voice was a deep, velvet baritone, smooth and controlled, laced with a dry humor that did nothing to soften the lethal presence he radiated. The temperature in the room had dropped several degrees. Evangeline found her own voice, though it felt brittle in her throat.
I assume you're not here to check out a book.
A flicker of something, not quite surprise, maybe appreciation, passed through his silver eyes. He took a step toward her, his movements silent on the ancient stone. The shadows in the room seemed to stretch toward him, drawn to him like iron filings to a magnet.
An astute observation. My patriarch has an interest in a certain asset, a historical anomaly, one who seems to be immune to the usual methods of persuasion.
He stopped a few feet from her table, his gaze falling to the open codex, then back to her face. He knew. Of course he knew. The two most powerful shard houses, Morrow's and Arcady, converging on her in a single night. She felt less like a person and more like a territory being disputed by warring gods. She lifted her chin, refusing to show the fear that was making her blood sing.
I'm a historian, not an asset.
The world is full of historians. You little scribe are something new, something valuable. Now you will come with me. My methods of persuasion are significantly more effective than theirs.
He wasn't threatening her, not exactly. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the calm certainty of a being who had not been successfully denied anything in centuries. He was giving her the illusion of a choice, a courtesy he clearly felt was magnanimous. She didn't move. She just watched him, her emerald eyes narrowed.
And if I decline?
Then I will be forced to be less courteous, and I will be very disappointed. I so rarely get to enjoy good manners.
He started to move around the table, a predator circling its prey. The candlelight caught the sharp planes of his face, leaving half of it in absolute darkness. He was devastatingly handsome, in the way a perfectly crafted blade is beautiful right before it cuts you. He stopped directly in front of her, so close she could feel the cold radiating from his body. She could smell the night on him, the scent of cold stone and something ancient, like a forgotten tomb. He reached for her arm. The movement was meant to be simple, overpowering, a declaration of ownership. His gloved fingers, long and elegant, closed around her bare wrist, and the world fractured. For 947 years, the Shard of Umbra had been a part of him, a constant, humming counterpoint to the silence of his own unbeating heart. It was a symphony of whispers from every shadow in the world, a river of cold power that flowed through his veins, the source of his strength, his speed, his very identity. The moment his glove touched her skin, the music stopped. He gasped a sharp, ragged intake of breath that was utterly involuntary. He staggered back a step, snatching his hand away as if he'd been burned. The sudden, absolute silence in his soul was a physical blow. It was a deafness more profound than any sound. The whispers, the power, the constant pressure of the shard gone, vanished. It was terrifying. It was exquisite. He felt quiet. For the first time since he was a mortal man breathing his last on a cold battlefield, his soul was utterly, blessedly silent. She saw it all in his eyes. The mask of cynical, ancient power shattered, replaced by a flicker of raw, uncomprehending shock. For a heartbeat, the predator was gone, and in his place was something lost and vulnerable. She saw the minute tremor in his hand as he stared at it, then back at her. The silver of his eyes seemed to dim, the molten light replaced by a stunned confusion. Her own pulse, which had been a frantic bird against her ribs, steadied. In his shock, she found a strange, cold calm.
What did you feel?
Nothing.
He said the word like a curse, but the look in his eyes said it was a prayer. He stared at her, not as an asset anymore, but as a miracle, a blasphemy. The humming power of the shard was already beginning to seep back into him, a familiar tide returning, but the memory of its absence was a fresh, clean wound. He had tasted silence, and now the song of his own power felt like a scream. Behind them, outside the massive archive doors, came the sound of running footsteps, of shouting. More were coming. House Arcady would not abandon their prize so easily. Silas's gaze snapped to the door, then back to her. The cold mask of the Prince of Shadows slammed back into place, but she had seen the crack. She knew it was there. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and in that moment, 1,000 years of loyalty to his house, to his patriarch, to the cold calculus of the War of Ascension, turned to dust. The approaching footsteps were heavy, numerous. They would be at the doors in moments. Silas's mind, a machine of strategy honed over centuries of war and intrigue, worked with chilling speed. His orders from Patriarch Valerian had been clear: secure the asset, bring the null to the Onyx Court, a living weapon to neutralize House Arcady's shard bearers, a key to winning the War of Ascension. But the orders had been written before he had felt the silence, before he understood what she was. To hand her over to Valerian would be to give the old spider the one thing in existence that could quiet the ceaseless screaming in his own soul. Valerian would study her, weaponize her, and when her use was spent, he would discard her. The thought of that perfect, addictive silence being dissected on a stone table in the name of political gain was intolerable. Treason, he discovered, was not a cold, calculated decision. It was a visceral, protective instinct. As simple and as absolute as breathing.
Change of plans.
He held out his hand to her, the same gloved hand that had touched her wrist. Not a gesture of capture this time, but an offering, an invitation.
You're coming with me.
You said that already. I wasn't convinced the first time.
The first time I was offering you a cage, a very comfortable cage with excellent reading material, but a cage nonetheless. Now I am offering you the alternative.
Which is?
Them.
He nodded toward the heavy oak doors, which were now shuddering under the impact of a heavy blow from the outside. A splintering crack appeared near the iron lock. He was right. Her options were a Prince of Shadows, a matriarch of flesh crafters, or a very messy, very immediate death.
Why the change of heart? What am I to you?
He held her gaze, and for a moment, the Prince of Shadows was gone again. She saw the echo of that desperate quiet in his eyes. He couldn't tell her the truth. To admit his power had faltered, even for a second, was a weakness no immortal could afford. To admit he craved, it was a confession of addiction.
Let's just say my patriarch's plans for you lack a certain elegance, and I find myself curious. You will be safer with me.
He didn't wait for her answer. He closed his eyes for a second. Evangeline felt a subtle shift in the shadows around him, a coalescing of purpose. He was communing with his power, with his house, lying to them. She could feel the deception like a cold draft.
The asset is lost. Arcady forces intercepted. They have her. I am in pursuit.
He opened his eyes, the silver glinting with grim satisfaction. The lie was sent. He was now officially a traitor, hunting a ghost of his own creation. The doors groaned again, the woods screaming in protest. Evangeline looked at the dead men on the floor at the splintering door, and at the vampire prince offering her a gloved hand and a lie. It wasn't a choice. It was the least terrible of three very bad options. She placed her hand in his. His grip was firm, cold even through the leather, and utterly certain.
Hold on.
He pulled her close, his arm wrapping around her waist. The world dissolved. The library, the books, the blood, it all smeared into a dizzying vortex of absolute black. It was not like moving through a space, but like the space itself folding around them. It was cold, silent, and felt like falling into a starless sky. The world snapped back into focus with a nauseating lurch. Evangeline stumbled, her hand flying to her head. The library was gone, replaced by this cold, dead place. Silas released her, his face impassive, though she saw the slight tension in his jaw. The journey through shadow had a cost, even for him.
Where are we?
Sanctuary, one of the old ones, predates the schism, predates the city above. No one has set foot here in 500 years. We'll be safe for a time.
Safe, the word sounded absurd in this tomb. The silence here was different from the libraries. It was a heavy, waiting silence, full of echoes that hadn't been made yet. The moonlight from above was the only clean thing in the room, a pillar of cold, blue-gray light in the oppressive dark. She watched him move to the center of the room, into the light, his black coat a slash of void against the pale glow.
You need to start talking. What are shard houses? Why do 2 of them suddenly want me dead or captured? What the hell is a null?
Silas turned to face her. In the stark moonlight, the shadows carved his face, making him look impossibly old. He looked tired, she realized with a jolt. Not physically, but a soul-deep weariness that clung to him like a shroud.
1,000 years ago there was one, the progenitor, first of our kind, something close to a god. They were betrayed, shattered. Their power was splintered into 7 fragments, the shards. The 7 most powerful of their childhood claimed them, and in doing so founded the 7 shard houses.
He began to pace the edge of the moonlight, a caged predator. My house, Morrows, claimed the shard of Umbra, power over shadow, secrets, fear. House Arcady took the shard of Vita, dominion over flesh and bone. For a millennium, we have been locked in a cold war, a political game of assassination and maneuvering called the War of Ascension. The goal is to reunite the shards, to claim the shattered throne and reforge the godhead.
And the war is turning hot.
The matriarch of Arcady is ambitious. My own patriarch is patient, a dangerous combination which brings us to you.
He stopped pacing and looked directly at her. The weight of his 900-year-old gaze was a physical thing.
You are a null, a human whose blood is anathema to our power. Your touch, as I discovered, can sever a vampire's connection to their shard. You are immune to our influence. In a war fought by beings of immense power, you are the ultimate weapon. A walking, talking dead zone. To House Arcady, you are a specimen to be vivisected. To my house, you are to be a scalpel, the perfect assassin's tool.
Evangeline felt the blood drain from her face. A weapon, a tool, not a person. Her entire life, her obsession with history, her quiet existence among books, it was all an illusion. She was just a freak of blood, a prize to be fought over by monsters. She wrapped her arms around herself, the cold of the chapel seeping into her bones. She looked at Silas, standing so still in the moonlight, a perfect Gothic horror. He had saved her, yes, but he had also been sent to enslave her. And he had omitted the most important detail, what her touch had actually felt like to him. Hours passed, or minutes. Time had no meaning in this place. For Silas, the silence of the chapel was a poor imitation of the true silence he craved. Here in the dark, the whispers of his shard were muted but ever present, 1,000 faint voices from 1,000 city shadows. And something else was rising, a far older, far simpler need, the thirst. The fight in the library, the jump through the shadows, it had drawn on his reserves. And now, in this enclosed space, the scent of her was overwhelming. Not just the mundane scent of her skin, her hair, but the vibrant, intoxicating aroma of her blood. It was a deep, resonant thrumming beneath her skin, a song of life that called to every dead cell in his body. He clenched his fists, his knuckles white in the gloom. He could hear her heartbeat, a steady, slow rhythm that was both a torment and a fascination. Thump, 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 life. She saw the change in him. It was subtle, a stillness that was too rigid. The way his gaze kept flicking to the pulse fluttering in her throat. He was fighting something, and she had a scholar's certainty what it was. She had read the accounts. The hunger, the thirst, the beast. It had 1,000 names, but it was one singular, ancient truth of his kind. She should have been terrified. A part of her was. But another, larger part, the part that had spent a lifetime dissecting mysteries, was possessed by a clinical, dangerous curiosity.
Are you all right?
I'm fine.
A lie, a clean, obvious lie. She could see the tension in the line of his jaw, the faint darkness of the veins under the pale skin of his hands. He was a predator holding himself on the tightest of leashes, and the strain was showing.
You're thirsty.
The words hung in the cold air between them. He didn't answer. He just watched her, his silver eyes glowing faintly in the dark, the pupils blown wide. In that moment, he was not a prince or a strategist. He was a starving thing.
Does it hurt?
It is a constant pressure. It can be ignored for a time.
She did something then that defied all logic, all instinct for self-preservation. She stood up from the altar steps and walked toward him, out of her small circle of candlelight and into the encroaching cold. She stopped just before him, close enough to feel the chill coming off his skin, close enough to see the war happening behind his eyes.
What if it didn't have to?
Before he could react, before the predator could overcome the prince, she reached out and laid her hand flat against his chest, over his heart. Her palm was warm against the cold velvet of his coat. The moment her skin touched the fabric over his chest, the effect was instantaneous. It wasn't the total, shocking severance of their first contact. The leather of his coat and the silk of his shirt provided a barrier, but it was enough. The gnawing, burning acid of the thirst receded. The frantic, predatory edge of his senses dulled. The ceaseless, low hum of the shard in his blood quieted to a barely there whisper. It was like a cool hand on a fevered brow, a moment of peace in a 900-year-old war. A ragged breath escaped his lips, a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. He stared down at her hand, then at her face. Her emerald eyes were wide, watching him, not with fear, but with an intense, analytical focus. She was studying him, testing a hypothesis. The sheer, suicidal audacity of it was breathtaking. Any other human would be screaming or fleeing. She was conducting an experiment.
When you touched me in the library, I saw it in your eyes. It wasn't just my immunity to your influence. It was something else. You looked like you'd heard silence for the first time.
He didn't deny it. He couldn't. She had seen past the monster, past the prince, and diagnosed the ailment of his soul with the precision of a master physician. The proximity was dizzying. He could smell the scent of her hair, like old books and winter air. He could feel the gentle, living warmth of her palms seeping through the layers of cloth, a warmth he hadn't felt in nearly a millennium. It was more intoxicating than blood. It was more dangerous. Her own heart was beating a steady, heavy rhythm. Not from fear now, but from something else. Something terrifyingly new. To stand this close to a creature of such immense power and to know that her touch could not only nullify but soothe it. It was a heady, terrifying feeling. It was power. Her power. She looked at his face, at the conflict in his silver eyes, at the vulnerability she had exposed, and she felt a tremor of something that felt dangerously like empathy. Or perhaps ownership. The moment was shattered by a sound from far above. The scrape of metal on stone. The heavy grate that provided their only light was being moved. Silas's head snapped up, the predator returning in an instant. The piece was gone, replaced by a cold, lethal focus. He gently took her hand from his chest, his gloved fingers lingering for a fraction of a second too long against hers.
They found us.
The chapel, a place of dead silence for 5 centuries, erupted into a symphony of violence. The Morrow's assassins landed silently, spreading out, blades of solidified shadow forming in their hands. They moved with a liquid grace, their target clear, Silas. From the breach in the wall, 3 more Arcady hunters followed their golem, their violet eyes glowing with clinical hunger. Their target was Evangeline. Silas moved so fast he was a blur. He pushed Evangeline behind the crumbling stone altar, his body a shield between her and the unfolding carnage.
Stay down, don't move.
He didn't wait for a reply. He met the first Morrow's assassin with a clash of shadow on shadow. The sound was like tearing silk, but the impact threw sparks of pure darkness into the air. He was a whirlwind of controlled fury, his movements precise, economical, and utterly lethal. A blade of night slid between the ribs of one assassin. He used the body as a shield against a strike from another, spinning and kicking the corpse into the path of the lurching flesh golem.
Traitor, the Patriarch wants your head.
He'll have to get in line.
The flesh golem swiped at him, its massive, multi-jointed arm smashing a stone pillar into dust where he had been a second before. The Arcady hunters ignored the fight between the Morrows, their focus entirely on the altar. They advanced slowly, their smiles wide and unnatural, like surgeons approaching a fascinating new specimen.
The matriarch will be so pleased. She has such wonderful plans for you, little Null.
Evangeline pressed herself against the cold stone of the altar, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The candelabra had been knocked over, plunging her side of the chapel into near-total darkness, illuminated only by the violent flashes of the fight. Silas was magnificent, a god of death holding off an impossible tide, but he was 1 against 7, and one of them was a monster torn from a nightmare. He couldn't protect her and fight them all. Amaro's assassin, seeing an opportunity, disengaged from Sela's and shadow-stepped, his form dissolving into black mist and reappearing directly behind the altar, his hand reaching for Evangeline's hair. Sela's roared her name, a sound of pure fury and terror, but he was locked in combat with the golem, its massive fist closing around his leg. He was too far away. He wasn't going to make it. The assassin's grip was like iron. He yanked her head back, exposing the pale, vulnerable line of her throat. His other hand, coalescing from shadow into solid flesh, reached for her. The chilling touch of his fingers brushed her neck.
The Patriarch will reward me for bringing back the weapon and the traitor's whore.
Terror gave way to a white-hot spike of pure, unadulterated rage. Not his whore, not a weapon, not a prize. With a guttural scream, Evangeline reacted on pure instinct. She twisted, her hands flying up to grab his arm to pry his fingers from her hair. The moment her bare skin made contact with his, a desperate, frantic grab at his forearm, the world went silent. The assassin screamed. It was not a sound of pain, but of pure, soul-shredding agony. The shadow stuff that made up his form, the power of the shard of Umbra that he commanded, began to unravel like a frayed rope. Where her hands touched him, his form flickered violently, dissolving into inert, powerless flesh. The shadows that wreathed him recoiled, hissing away from her touch as if she were white-hot iron. He lost his grip on her, stumbling back, his eyes wide with horror behind his mask.
It burns. She burns the shadow.
He was vulnerable, a vampire stripped of his power, as clumsy and slow as any mortal. And in that moment of vulnerability, an Arcady hunter, mistaking the situation, saw an opening and lunged. A sharpened blade of bone slid cleanly through the Moro's assassin's back and out his chest. The assassin looked down at the crimson tip, then collapsed without another sound. The entire chapel fell silent for a single, stunned heartbeat. The remaining assassins, the Arcady hunters, even the mindless golem, all paused. Silas, who had just shattered the golem's grip by phasing his leg through its hand, stood frozen, his silver eyes locked on Evangeline. She was on her knees behind the altar, breathing heavily, staring at her own hands as if they belonged to someone else. They were just hands, pale in the gloom, but he had seen it. He had felt the ripple in the fabric of the Umbra as her touch had not just blocked, but actively unmade the assassin's power. She wasn't a dead zone. She was a solvent. She didn't just nullify their power. She erased it. He finally understood. The silence she gave him wasn't a passive effect. It was an act of consumption. She was drinking his power, and he was letting her, craving the quiet it left behind. The full, terrifying scope of what she was crashed down on him, and he knew, with chilling certainty, that they could not keep running. They needed answers. The sanctuary of the Argent Scribes was a place outside the politics of Nocturne. It was neutral ground, protected by ancient laws and the universally acknowledged fact that the scribes knew every secret, every weakness of every house. To attack them was to invite total annihilation from a dozen fronts at once. Getting inside, however, required a debt. Silas had just paid one, calling in a favor a century old.
The Prince of Shadows gracing my halls, and a traitor to his house if the whispers are to be believed. You bring trouble with you, Silas.
I bring a question, Elder, one only your archives can answer.
Casimir's black ice eyes shifted to Evangeline, who stood slightly behind Silas, looking up at the impossible scale of the library with a scholar's awe. The elder's gaze lingered on her, his expression unreadable.
The question stands before you, does it not? The human null, the first to appear in a millennium. House Maros and House Arcady are tearing the city apart looking for her, and you have brought her here.
I'm not a what, I'm a who. My name is Evangeline Rostova, and I need to know why I can do what I do.
Casimir turned his full attention to her. A faint, dry smile touched his thin lips. He appreciated her fire. With a gesture, the massive grimoire on the lectern floated toward them, stopping and hovering in the air between the three of them.
The shard of memory holds all things. Let us see what it remembers of you, Evangeline Rostova.
He placed one long, spider-like finger on the page. The air grew cold, and the intricate script on the vellum began to glow with a faint, crimson light. Words and images swirled on the page, coalescing into a passage that was not there moments before. Silas and Evangeline leaned in, reading the elegant, archaic text as it formed. The passage spoke of the time of the Great Schism. It spoke of the progenitor's human consort, a scholar and an alchemist named Lyra. Fearing the corruption she saw growing in the progenitor's childer, she had created a failsafe. Not a weapon to be wielded, but a lineage. A bloodline, carefully cultivated through the centuries in secret, passed down through mortal generations, waiting. A bloodline that would lie dormant until the houses grew too proud, too warlike, and threatened to shatter the world in their ambition. A bloodline whose very nature would be to sever the connection between vampire and shard, to force them back to a time before their borrowed godhood.
And in the time of the final war, the silent bloom will come forth, not of our blood, but of the blood that tamed our first. She will be the price for our pride, the unmaking of our power. She is not the key to the shattered throne. She is the lock.
The silence that followed was absolute. Evangeline stared at the glowing words, her heart a cold, heavy stone in her chest. She was not a random mutation. She was not a weapon. She was a prophecy. A living reset button for an entire species, designed 1,000 years ago by a woman she had never known. The weight of it, the sheer, terrifying scale of it, threatened to crush her. Silas looked from the book to her face, and his expression was one of dawning, horrified awe. He had not stolen a weapon from his house. He had stolen the apocalypse. Elder Casimir closed the grimoire with a soft thump that echoed in the vast, silent space. The book floated back to its place on the high shelves, swallowed by the darkness.
Now you understand. The War of Ascension is no longer about which house will rule. It is about whether your kind will continue to exist at all.
They'll hunt her, all of them, not to use her, to kill her, to stop the prophecy.
Can you stop a flood by killing the first drop of rain? The prophecy is in motion, but yes, they will try. Patriarch Valerian will see her as a threat to his absolute control. Matriarch Ravenna will see her as a beautiful, unique specimen whose destruction would be the ultimate artistic statement. The other houses, when they learn of this, will fall in line with one or the other. They are all corrupt. They have all fallen to the very pride Lyra predicted.
Is there anywhere I can go where they can't find me?
Casimir stroked his thin chin, his gaze distant, sifting through a millennium of secrets. There are places forgotten even by us, places warded with power older than the schism. The progenitor's tomb is one such place. Its seals were keyed to their blood, not to the shards. It might not recognize shard-given power and may deny entry to any who wield it. To you, it might open its doors. He moved to a vast, circular map of the city carved into the stone floor. With a wave of his hand, a network of faint silver lines glowed within the stone, showing the hidden pathways beneath Nocturne. A single point glowed with a brighter crimson light, the tomb.
This knowledge, this path, it is not given freely. The scribes have remained neutral for 1,000 years. By helping you, I endanger that. There is a price.
Name it.
A blood oath. From you, Prince of Morrows. Swear that should you survive this, should you find yourself in a position of power, you will forever guarantee the neutrality and safety of the Argent scribes. Swear that House Morrows will never raise a hand against us, no matter who sits on its throne.
This was more than a simple promise. It was a binding magical contract, an act that would place him in direct opposition to his patriarch's ambitions. Valerian saw the scribes as a library of secrets to be plundered once he had consolidated power. To make this oath was to burn the final bridge back to his old life, to his house. It was the final, irrevocable act of treason. Silas didn't even pause. He drew a small, wicked-looking silver dagger from his coat. Without a word, he sliced a clean line across his palm. Crimson blood, dark and thick, welled up instantly. He knelt, placing his bleeding hand flat on the map, directly over the scribe's insignia carved in the stone.
I, Silas of House Morrows, swear on my blood and my name, the Argent scribes will have my protection, always.
The blood on the stone flared with a brilliant crimson light, sinking into the carved lines and sealing the oath. The light on the map showing the way to the tomb grew brighter, clearer. Casimir gave a slow, satisfied nod. The deal was struck. Evangeline watched the entire exchange, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. He was severing himself from his entire world. For her. The weight of that sacrifice was a terrifying thing to bear. They had been running for hours, following the twisting, subterranean paths Casimir had revealed. Now, for a moment, they were still. The wind was a mournful howl through the stonework, cold enough to make Evangeline's teeth ache. Silas seemed unaffected by it, but he had positioned himself to block the worst of the gale, a silent, unconscious act of protection. The prophecy lay between them, a third presence in the bell tower. Silent Bloom. The lock. 1,000 years of history and blood and planning had led to her, sitting here, shivering in a forgotten church. It was too much to comprehend. She looked at the man beside her, a silhouette against the city lights. An ancient killer, a prince of a dark court, and now a traitor. All for a prophecy he hadn't known existed until an hour ago.
You shouldn't have done that, the oath.
It was a fair price.
It was your future, your home, everything.
He gave a short, humorless laugh, the sound snatched away by the wind. My home is a nest of whispers and poison. My future was an eternity of service to a man who views me as a finely crafted weapon. Do not mourn my losses, little scribe. They were chains I hadn't realized I was wearing. She looked at him, really looked at him. The lantern light softened the sharp angles of his face, and in the depths of his silver eyes, she saw not a monster, but the profound, crushing weight of his long existence.
Then why did you really do it? In the library. You could have taken me to him. You were ordered to, but you lied. You threw everything away in a single moment. It wasn't about elegance or my safety. What was it?
He was silent for a long time, his gaze fixed on the city below. The wind howled, and the moment stretched, thick with unspoken things. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, stripped of its usual sardonic armor. It was the most honest sound she had ever heard from him.
Do you have any idea what it's like to have 1,000 years of noise in your head?
He turned to look at her, and his eyes were raw. Every shadow has a voice. Every secret a whisper, the shard. It sings a song of power day and night without end. It's been my constant companion since I was 20 years old. It is the source of my strength, and it is a ceaseless, crushing weight. For 900 years, my soul has been screaming. He leaned a little closer, the space between them shrinking, charged with the cold night air and his confession.
And then I touched you, and it all just stopped. It was gone. The whispers, the song, the weight of every death I have ever dealt, all of it. For 1 second there was peace, silence.
He looked down at his own hands, then back at her, his expression one of desperate, painful honesty. I didn't save you from my patriarch, Evangeline. I stole you. I stole you because you are the only quiet I have found in a millennium. And I am a selfish, selfish bastard. A tear escaped her eye, freezing instantly on her cheek. It wasn't pity she felt. It was a terrifying, shattering recognition. He saw her as his salvation. And in that moment, seeing the immense pain he carried, the man beneath the monster, she realized she had stopped seeing him as her captor. The line between them, between protector and protected, predator and prey, had just irrevocably blurred into something else entirely. Something far more dangerous for them both. They reached the cemetery gates just as the moon broke through the clouds. The place felt wrong. The natural sounds of the night, the wind, the rustle of unseen things were absent. The silence here was oppressive, a held breath. The entrance to the progenitor's tomb dominated the landscape, a monument to a dead god. It radiated a cold that had nothing to do with the winter night.
Something's not right. The wards feel thin.
Before Evangeline could ask what he meant, the trap was sprung. From the shadows between the mausoleums, figures emerged, dozens of them. To their left, clad in the severe black robes of their house, stood the honor guard of Moros. At their head was Patriarch Valerian himself, a gaunt, skeletal figure, his bald head gleaming in the moonlight, his eyes like chips of black ice.
Silas, my wayward son, you have led us on quite a chase.
Simultaneously, from the right, more figures materialized, these clad in the tight crimson silks of Arcady. They moved with a boneless, unsettling grace. Leading them was not a hunter or an agent, but the matriarch herself, Ravenna. Her beauty was terrifying and clearly unnatural, her skin like polished bone, her silver hair braided with what looked like living veins. Her violet eyes fixed on Evangeline with the detached, hungry curiosity of a vivisectionist.
Oh good, the rabble of House Moros can watch. I do so love an audience for my acquisitions.
Silas instinctively moved in front of Evangeline, shielding her with his body. He hadn't drawn a weapon. His posture was one of grim resignation. He had walked them into a perfectly executed pincer movement. Casimir's information had been good, but Valerian's spies and Ravenna's hunters had been better.
Your treason is noted, Silas. It will be dealt with, but it can be mitigated. Step aside. Give me the null. She is the property of House Moros.
Property? You speak of her like a piece of furniture, old man. She is a work of art, a biological masterpiece. She belongs in a gallery, not a dungeon, my gallery.
The two factions stood poised, 100 feet of snow-dusted graveyard between them, with Silas and Evangeline as the terrified epicenter. This was it. The Cold War turning hot, right here among the dead. Valerian's gaze was fixed on Silas, a look of profound, cold disappointment. It was the look of a master craftsman at a favored tool that had suddenly, inexplicably broken.
This is your last chance, Silas. Do not make me destroy my finest creation. Stand down.
Silas looked from the cold, calculating face of his patriarch to the ecstatic, artistic madness in Ravenna's eyes. He saw Evangeline's future in their expressions. Valerian would use her until she was a husk. Ravenna would peel her apart layer by layer to see what made her beautiful. He had tasted silence, and he would not let them have it. He would not let them have her.
No.
The word hung in the frozen air for a heartbeat, and then Valerian gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. The Morrow's honor guard surged forward. From his hands, 2 blades of pure, solidified darkness coalesced, drinking the moonlight, leaving trails of black mist in the air. He met the charge not with the desperate fury of a cornered animal, but with the focused, deadly grace of a master. He was a storm of black velvet and darker blades. He moved through his former brethren like a phantom, his motions too fast for the human eye to properly track. A shadow blade slid through the throat of one guard. He spun, parrying a strike from another, his free hand lashing out to snap a neck with a sharp, dry crack. The sound was obscene in the quiet snow, but they were many. For everyone he cut down, 2 more took their place, their own shadow magic weaving a cage of darkness around him. Matriarch Ravenna watched the display with a detached, appreciative smile, as if observing a particularly brutal ballet. She made no move to intervene. Why waste her own soldiers when the shadows of Moros were so eager to die?
My, such passion. I haven't seen him fight like that since the siege of Constantinople. It's almost a shame to have to put him down.
Evangeline could only watch in horror, her hands pressed to her mouth. He was magnificent, a fallen angel raging against the dying of the light. But he was bleeding. Small cuts, nicks, a deeper gash on his arm that bled a sluggish, dark crimson onto the white snow. He was tiring. His movements were still impossibly fast, but they were losing their perfect economy. He was one ancient vampire against a dozen of his own kind, the elite killers he himself had trained. He was losing, and he knew it. But he did not stop. He would die here, on his feet, forming a wall of his own body between her and the world that wanted to tear her apart. Ravenna lifted a hand, her long fingers tipped with sharpened obsidian nails. A subtle gesture, almost casual. She was still smiling, her violet eyes fixed not on Silas, but on Evangeline.
Enough playing, time to collect my prize.
From the ground at her feet, a sliver of bone long, white and sharp as a scalpel erupted from the frozen earth. With a flick of her wrist, it shot across the battlefield. It did not fly like an arrow, but moved with a living, seeking purpose, weaving through the chaos of the melee. Silas was engaged with 2 Moros guards, his shadow blades a blur. He saw the movement at the edge of his vision, a flicker of white against the darkness. He tried to turn to interpose his blade, but he was too slow. The bone shard struck him high in the chest, just below the collarbone, with a sickening, wet thump. It punched clean through velvet, silk, and 900 years of unliving flesh. He gasped, a choked, rattling sound, and the blades of shadow in his hands dissolved into smoke. His silver eyes went wide with shock and pain. The fight around him stopped, both Moros and Arcady forces freezing at the sudden, dramatic shift. Silas staggered back, his hand coming up to grip the grotesquely white shard of bone protruding from his chest. Dark, crimson blood soaked the front of his coat, a shocking flower blooming on the black velvet. He looked at Ravenna, his expression one of pure hatred. He tried to draw on his power to step into the shadows, but nothing happened. The wound. It was not just a wound, it was poison. Arcady magic, the shard of Vita twisted into a tool of unmaking, was flooding his system, severing his connection to his own power from the inside. He collapsed to his knees in the snow, choking on his own blood. His gaze found Evangeline's. All the fight went out of his eyes, replaced by a desperate, agonizing regret. He had failed. After all of it, the treason, the flight, the oath, he had failed to protect her. The light in his silver eyes began to flicker and die. Evangeline screamed his name, a raw, ragged sound torn from her throat. She gathered him into her arms, cradling his head, heedless of the blood that soaked her dress. His skin was colder than the night air, his breathing a shallow, wet rattle. Tears streamed down her face, freezing on her cheeks.
No, Silas, stay with me, please.
He looked up at her, his silver eyes losing their light, turning a dull, mortal gray. He could see Valerian and Ravenna approaching, their victory assured. He had one last act, one final, desperate move. It was not a strategy. It was not a plan. It was the last spasm of a dying, selfish heart that refused to let go. He reached up, his trembling, blood-slicked hand cupping her cheek.
Forgive me.
He pulled her face down to his. For a wild, insane moment, she thought he was going to kiss her. But then she saw his fangs, white and sharp, slide down from his gums. It wasn't a kiss he wanted. It was a claim. He lunged, his mouth finding the soft, vulnerable curve of her neck. The bite was a sharp, searing pain, but it was instantly overwhelmed by something else. A dizzying, ecstatic rush. He wasn't just taking her blood. He was trying to push his own into her to forge a blood bond, the most sacred and permanent tie known to their kind. A desperate attempt to bind her soul to his, even as his was guttering out. It was an act of ultimate possession, of desperate love, of a refusal to die alone. But he was trying to forge a bond with the silent bloom. He was pouring gasoline on a bonfire. The prophecy had other plans. Silas did not cry out in triumph. He screamed, a raw, agonized sound of pure, undiluted agony. He felt the bond take hold, but not as it should. Instead of his essence flowing into her, he felt hers, the profound, absolute null state of her blood flood into him, latching onto the root of his power. And then it pulled. He felt his 900-year connection to the shard of Umbra being ripped out of him. It was not a severing. It was an evisceration. It was a spiritual amputation of a limb he hadn't known was a limb. The whispers of the shadows, the cold river of power, the very thing that made him, it was all being drawn out through his fangs, a violent, one-way torrent flowing not away, but into her. The bone shard in his chest dissolved, the Arcady magic instantly neutralized by the raw power of the transfer. His wound healed in a flash of light, but it left him, empty, hollowed out. He collapsed back into the snow, healed but mortal frail, the last of his ancient power gone. Evangeline stumbled back, gasping, her hand flying to the two small punctures on her neck. They were already healing, leaving no trace, but she felt different. She felt full. A vast, cold, ancient power was pouring into her, settling into her bones, coiling in the base of her spine. It felt like swallowing the night sky, and the shadows in the cemetery. They noticed. Every shadow cast by every tombstone, every mausoleum, every twisted tree began to move. They stretched, writhed, and flowed away from their sources, pouring across the snow-covered ground like rivers of black ink. They flowed towards Evangeline. They coiled around her ankles, climbed her legs, wrapped around her like a living cloak woven from pure darkness. She looked down in terror, and awe as the shadows that had once answered to a prince of House Moros now danced at her fingertips, protective and possessive. She had not just severed his power. She had not just stolen it. She had answered it. Valerian and Ravenna stood frozen, staring at the impossible sight. A human, a mere mortal, now commanding the very essence of the shard of Umbra. Silas lay in the snow, his eyes no longer silver but a flat, human gray, staring in equal parts horror and wonder at the woman who now wore his soul like a crown. The prophecy was fulfilled. The silent bloom had withered the branch. The moment of stunned silence was a gift. Silas knew it would not last. The shock would fade, replaced by greed and terror, and every vampire in this graveyard would descend upon them. He grabbed Evangeline's arm, his touch now warm, his grip merely human.
Evangeline, the shadows, command them, get us out of here.
I don't know how.
Just think of somewhere else, anywhere, and pull.
She squeezed her eyes shut, the torrent of alien power roaring in her veins. She thought of the library, the bell tower, an alleyway she had passed once, dark and narrow and forgotten. She focused on the memory, the smell of rain and refuse, and she pulled with all her might on the abyss that had opened up inside her. The shadows around them exploded. Not outward, but inward, collapsing on them like a black hole. With a sound like a universe folding in on itself, they were gone. They left behind a perfect circle of untouched snow, 2 stunned vampire armies, and a world that had been irrevocably, terrifyingly changed. They reappeared with a gut-wrenching lurch in a dark, rain-slicked alley miles away. Steam rose from sewer grates, and the only light came from a flickering crimson neon sign across the street that read Crimson Tales. The sign cast shifting red and blue light on their faces. Silas, mortal frail and breathing hard, leaned heavily against a brick wall, the first signs of condensation showing on his breath in the cold air. Evangeline stood in the center of the alley, staring at her own hands. Wisps of shadow still curled around her fingers, obeying her unspoken will. She was Evangeline Rostova, a historian, and she now wielded the power of a 900-year-old prince of shadows. He was Silas, a vampire, now as powerless as a fledgling, his immortality a sudden, terrifying cage without the strength to defend it. They were alone. They were hunted by every power in the world. And as they looked at each other in the flickering, bloody light of the neon sign, they both understood the same terrifying truth. The war was not over. It had just begun. Ah, what a delightful unraveling, my little ones. Poor Silas, a prince of shadows for 9 centuries, reduced to a mere mortal, simply by seeking to claim Evangeline. How exquisitely foolish of him to mistake a weapon for a prize. And Evangeline, now swathed in shadows she barely comprehends. To see Valerian and Ravenna so utterly undone, their ancient schemes crumbling at a single, unexpected kiss, one lives for such moments. This, darlings, is merely the opening act of our Crimson Tales, each story spun exclusively for you. If you wish to witness the full, terrible bloom of this new power, then do ensure you subscribe. I promise, the suffering has only just begun.